Thank you all for coming today, and thank you all who are joining us via Zoom for this very important, and I would say very timely discussion about how we can protect students and families given the rhetoric and the stated objectives of the incoming administration. I'm Nick Perry. I am the Institutional Jedi Officer here at MIS. And before we get started, as we usually do, I'd like to start with the land acknowledgement that we usually do before any of our BIPOC voices at this program. So beginning in 1769, the Rumsen Ohlone people were dispossessed of their lands by Spanish missionaries and settlers who also forcibly expropriated Rumsen labor and perpetrated cultural genocide through forced baptisms. California's admission to statehood in 1850 subjected the Rumsen Ohlone peoples to a genocidal war of extermination, including slavery, rape, murder for bounty, massacre, and forced removal. And so we pause to acknowledge that the Middlebury Institute of International Studies at Monterey sits in the village of Shasta on the ancestral and unceded land of the Ohlone peoples. Several contemporary nations, including the Esalen, call this land home today. The surrounding Monterey Bay region includes lands traditionally inhabited by the Esalen, Chalon, Mutsun, and Salinan groups. We honor these groups' experiences in the past, present, and future, as we work collaboratively with them to protect the land and its inhabitants. Let us take a moment of silence to honor these Indigenous communities, past and present. We give thanks for the opportunity to respectfully share in the bounty of this place and are working collaboratively to protect it. We are all one in the sacred web of life that connects people, animals, plants, air, water, and earth. Okay, and so it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. From the Monterey County Civil Rights Office, we have Natalie Alfaro Frazier and Daniel Gonzalez, who are senior analysts. And from the Public Defender's Office, we have Alex Marez, who is the Deputy Public Defender and Immigration Specialist. And I don't know, Alex, you had some slides. I don't know if you want to start with that or if you want to just dive right into questions.
Sure. Do you want to just go ahead and bring them up? It's kind of short. More than anything, I just wanted to advise people that there is even an immigration specialist at the Public Defender's Office, because for most people, that makes zero sense, right? Any criminal charge in the state of California is usually dealt by the state of California or the county where it happened. However, the Supreme Court, because it does Supreme Court things, it tells you that you have to do something, and now we have to. So there is a case called Padilla. The Padilla case, United States versus Padilla, I believe it was 2010. Okay, so what we're going to chat about a little bit is why even we're here, right? Like why I exist, why my position exists, how public defenders got started, how it has to do with immigration. We're going to do some hypotheticals. Don't worry, they are hypotheticals, non-political, but they're important to kind of talk about. We're going to do a little hypothetical, and then I want you guys to ask questions as you want. Okay, next slide. We're going to go through this very quickly because yes, the reason why it's really important and why I think that most people should understand that immigration intersects with criminal justice is because most interactions when ICE contacts our community, any community, start at the jail, right? ICE just doesn't walk up to people. They can't, right? Because there's no probable cause to engage. There has to be a reason, and normally that reason is criminality. That criminality then extends its tentacles to everyone. If my dad gets deported and he's the primary breadwinner, all of a sudden I have a family that can't pay rent, that now needs assistance, and now kids aren't going to school. So it kind of trickles out into everything. Those are the issues that we primarily deal with. This is what a courtroom looks like. I'm going to assume and pray that none of you have ever been in a courtroom, but if you have, this is what it looks like, okay, in general. the reason why they say that attorneys pass the bar, anyone know why that is? Tricky. This little ledge right here, that's the bar. Anyone beyond that point has passed the bar and therefore you're an attorney, right? So that's the divider. I don't know how many folks remember pre-Vatican II churches. I know, weird, but you remember how there was a bar at the beginning, right? Because the priest would always face the other way and everyone would have to come there and only the priest was allowed to pass that bar? Similar kind of a concept. Next slide. Okay. Public defenders have not existed forever. I'm sure you guys probably already knew this, but they just didn't. 1963 was when the Supreme Court said that public defenders were lawfully ordered and lawfully required through the Sixth Amendment. This gentleman, Mr. Gideon, in Florida, everything wild happens in Florida, takes into a pool hall with the intent to commit a misdemeanor, steal something in there. He shows up to court and says, hey, I want to fight this case, I didn't do it. The court says, no, sorry, you're not getting a lawyer because you're not charged with capital murder. Then what happens? He loses and goes to jail, right? He appeals directly to the Supreme Court and they agree with him. You should have gotten a lawyer because you were deprived of one of your fundamental rights, right? Your right to liberty, right? So that's when we started. Interestingly enough, civil rights era, kind of how that works, right? So again, all of these things kind of trickle and are connected. So next slide. Okay, your basic misdemeanor, this is the process, okay? You're gonna have an arraignment. That's a fancy legal way of saying that they're charging you with a crime. That's when you're presented with a complaint, usually an initial offer. You're gonna have a bail or OR hearing, which means that you can try to bail out based on whatever the crime is, or you can actually release on your own recognizance. And then you go through the whole motion all the way through trial, right? These are different kinds of motions. Motion to compel discovery, suppress. A CERNA is if the district attorney has taken longer than a year to file your misdemeanor, you can ask for you're presumptively prejudiced because now you can't defend yourself. All the evidence is stale. This happens more often than you think. I had a CERNA granted recently from a DUI that was about 11 years old. Diligence. So obviously we couldn't fight that case. So we had to file a CERNA motion, right? All of these issues are kind of bit and twine, right? Then you go to trial. Eliminate motions are the fights that you will never see. Most of like the legal problems and the legal fights that we all have are right here. How many of you are familiar with the Menendez brothers? What happened in the first trial that did not happen in the second trial? Evidence of the abuse, right? This is where those fights happen. The in limine motion. Because the in limine motion set the ground rules for what's going to happen in the trial. The second trials didn't allow that evidence in, therefore they couldn't present it, and therefore they got the result that they got. Right? So most of the fights happen here and you will never see it. Next slide. So, immigration. This is a case out of Orange County, okay? I like this quote because I think I'll explain in a second. When the deportation consequence is truly clear and the duty to give correct advice is equally clear, not only was trial counsel's advice not accurate, it was either non-existent based on a misapprehension of the surrounding facts and law. Other than telling Lopez these charges are deportable, there is nothing in the record to support the contention that he gave Lopez accurate and affirmative advice on this consequence. The record therefore lacked substantial evidence to conclude that the trial counsel met the statutory requirements of section 1016.3. God, lawyers are terrible. God, we're the worst. We really are. Because what is it really saying? This lawyer didn't do his job. He could have said that in a sentence, right? But because lawyers are going to do legal things, this is what they write. What is 1016.3? Penal Code 1016.3 says that a lawyer, defense attorney, must give accurate immigration advice as to all of the consequences of all of the charges. Okay. In this case, what happened was the person had a gun and drugs. Felony possession of a gun and drugs. His private attorney said, oh, plead the drugs, you'll be fine, it's a misdemeanor, nobody cares. Great, he pleads to the misdemeanor, and then he's in Orange County, ends up in ICE detention. The person who spotted this issue was a volunteer law clerk who said, well, why are you here? You're a green card holder, what happened? He says, hey, my attorney told me to take the misdemeanor. If he had done his job, that attorney, he would have known that taking a felony gun case is better than taking a misdemeanor drug.
Dios me regaló.
It's true. So
Como
Dios
el aire.
So Dios le regaló another chance. It's true. Right? God did give this guy another chance because that law clerk happened to spot it. And if that law clerk had not spotted it, he wouldn't have been able to withdraw his plea and actually get a plea that was safe for him. It is weird to conceptualize this, that carrying a gun is better than carrying drugs, including cannabis. Including cannabis. So if you have anybody in your family, friends that are non-citizens, that have cannabis and they're like, oh, it's legal in California. Federally, it's not, right? People that work at cannabis dispensaries on paper are narco traffickers because they are dealing in a controlled substance that's a Schedule II drug, right? So them and El Chapo are at the same level allegedly. I know, I don't like it either, but that's the state of our law, okay? I think the best thing that you can do to serve your community is understand the language of immigration, right? I'm gonna go on a limb here and say that most of you have dated someone in your past. Is that fair to say? So most of you have dated someone, great. When I dated my wife, right, and we were first dating, oh my gosh, he's so great. Oh my gosh, he takes me to dinner. Oh my gosh, he takes me to all these wonderful places, right? Now that we're married, if I take her to dinner, take her all these wonderful places, what did you do? Right? Same set of facts, but we're looking at it from a very different perspective. Same with immigration, right? Understanding where someone is and in what position they're in. Admission for non-citizens who are undocumented is the biggest issue, bar none. Why? Let's take a look. It is a determination made as to whether a non-citizen is entitled to enter the United States. Often, it is a legal fiction because they're already here. Ever wonder why ICE can hold people forever without bond? This is why, because they're not legally here. So what do we have to do? Make sure that people stay admissible. What the heck does that mean? Avoid crimes or criminality that will make you inadmissible, like drugs, right? And also, when people leave, for example, and come back and are contacted with ICE, they may have triggered a temporary bar, a permanent bar, some other issue, or even an unlawful reentry at the federal level. All of these little things in people's history can change their whole perspective and their whole ability to seek status in the future. This usually happens at ports of entry, right? Ever wonder why asylum seekers always rush the border? Ever wonder why? You're like, perfectly good area over here where there's no fence, like, can't you just walk through there?
Because they have to go through inspection.
Exactly, they have to surrender themselves. Asylum rules require that someone seek asylum within a year of entering the country. So most people go directly to the port of entry, right? And all of the things that we notice in our everyday lives affect all of this. For example, how many of you are familiar with NAFTA? Right? Perfect. What do you think the odds are of you getting asylum with a NAFTA partner? Tricky, right? Is the federal government really going to say, oh yeah, you're going to seek asylum from Canada? Okay. No, of course not. We have a free trade agreement with that. Or Mexico? Of course not. Other countries, different issue, right? Next slide. Deportable is the other big word that people get afraid of, right? Deportable is usually, in my practice, and the way that I've seen it used, is when you actually have something that can be taken from you. So if you're an undocumented person, you are deportable for not having been admitted, period. However, that's a civil violation. It is the lowest tier of crime that you can commit as a non-citizen. But if you commit a deportable offense, now you can lose whatever you actually have. For example, you've all heard of LPRs, or lawful permanent residents, right? Green card holders. 2 crimes involving moral turpitude of any kind since entry or since your admission, and you can lose your green card. What the heck is a crime involving moral turpitude? Petty theft. Literally 2 petty thefts in the 30 years that you've been here as a green card holder, and you will lose it, right? But we can have a gun. I know, bananas, different issue. There's student visas, which is mostly what you deal with, which would be F1s, tourist visas, B visas, finance, investors, et cetera, the H1Bs, H2Bs, right? Those are, but the H2s are temporary non-immigrant visas. So the implication there is you're only here for a given purpose. When you're done with that purpose, you're out. So what I have to look for whenever, for example, I have an H2 employee is part of your contract with your employer driving a truck. Because if you have a DUI and now you lose your license, guess what? You're now out of H2 status, right? So then I have to try to negotiate something that'll allow him to keep his license, right? In order to save that visa. TPS, we all heard about TPS recently, right? They're eating the cats and dogs. I remember that, right? Do you know how hard it is, or how hard it is to keep TPS? 2 misdemeanors of any kind ever, and you lose it. Literally. Simple misdemeanor, penal code 415, disturbing the peace. That's a misdemeanor. 2 times you have loud music and they can take your TPS. 12,500, which is being an unlicensed driver. Happens all the time, right? You just are from another state. You don't have a California driver's license. 2 of those and you lose it. DACA, we all know what DACA is, right? Do you know how easy it is to lose DACA? Anyone familiar with that? 3 misdemeanors of any kind, 1 felony of any kind, or 1 significant misdemeanor. What does that mean? A DUI. It's the usual one that we see. So you could be a dreamer, have 1 DUI, and for me, the punishment would be loss of my ability to work, loss of my Medi-Cal, Medicaid. All of those services are now gone because of the DUI. But if you're a US citizen, you pay some fines and fees, your insurance goes up, but life moves on. For them, life does not move on. Next slide. This is what an employment authorization document looks like. There are about 70 or 80 ways you can get this document. For my purposes, this code is what tells me what this person has. Okay, like a lot of times it'll be, oh, well, I asked for something I don't know. Or I stopped at the border and my mom petitioned for me and I don't know. That category code is what is going to give us an indication of what they are and what the issues are with their status. Okay, for like I mentioned with LPRs or lawful permanent residents, 2 crimes involving moral turpitude and it's gone. For asylum seekers, it's a particularly serious crime. More of a nebulous standard, right? So depending on what that status code says, the whole range of issues is going to change for that. Next one. Okay. Don't know if you've ever been to law school, but it's like, honestly, this is kind of it. Not gonna lie, it really is. Iraq. How many lawyers are in here?
I'm a law student.
Oh, Iraq. We live and die by it, honestly. Issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. Anytime you talk to a lawyer, this is what they're gonna go. Just our brains get rewired that way. Can't explain it, but that's the way it goes. So let's go to the next one. Roe v. Wade. Here's what I want you to understand about the fight that is coming for all of us. The sub issue is what's gonna matter and what's gonna change the way that we litigate these cases. Roe v. Wade, does the Constitution recognize a woman's right to terminate her pregnancy by abortion? The sub issue was mootness. The heck is mootness? Ugh. Well, by the time it gets to the Supreme Court, either she had the baby or not, right? So if I'm on the government side, what am I gonna argue? Your Honor, this is already over. Nobody cares. The kid's already born or not. Right? Mootness was the issue that they had to get over. Okay, so go ahead, next slide. The way that they got over it was, sorry about the weird highlighting, capable of repetition yet evading review. That's the legal standard that the Supreme Court held in order to get over that mootness issue to even be able to decide Roe v. Wade. Okay? Again, aside from whatever happened with Roe v. Wade, any of your opinions, I just want you to understand that sub issue, just bridging that gap. Okay? Go on to the next slide. Dobbs, right? This is the case that overturned it. What was the sub issue? Stare decisis, right? All of those things that have already been decided, right? The precedent. How can we overturn something that's been around for 40 years? How did they do it, right? Next slide. They did it in a very cold way, in my opinion. Some of our most important constitutional decisions have been overruled by prior presidents. Let's mention Brown versus Board, and they throw in a bunch of other great ones that we really like. I know, sneaky, I know. Those sub-issues are where these immigration fights are going to happen, right? Why were they able to keep kids in cages? Because the kids weren't really here, right? Those are the sub-issues, right? And making sure that we understand the language that is being used. Next slide. This is a sample ICE detainer, okay? This ICE detainer is illegal on its face. But if you don't know that, or you haven't caught that idea, you will fall for this, okay? Why is it illegal on its face? Maintain custody of the alien for a period not to exceed 48 hours beyond the time when he or she would otherwise have been released from your custody. What does that tell you?
They can only hold you for 2 days.
2 days after you were supposed to be released. Don't you have a Fourth Amendment right to be free from unlawful searches and seizures? Right, this is illegal on its face, right? So if we aren't cognizant of those issues, right, or being able to call them out, we are going to miss those issues, right? Also, these are typically signed by an immigration officer, not a judicial officer, and there is a difference. When a judge signs a warrant, you better do it. When an officer signs a warrant, as an attorney, I'm an officer of the court. So if I sign it, does that count? No, it's gotta be a judge, right? But instructing our community to say, hey, if ICE comes to your door, you still have rights. Do not open that door, right? Ask for a warrant, right? And if that warrant, because obviously they'll put this in the window, yeah, we have a warrant. Not a judge, it's not a warrant. Come back when a judge signed it, right? Because this is how they'll get our clients or people to come out, but
How would someone know if that signature is a judge's
by
signature?
us telling them, because they have to pay attention to this. Yeah. So I did send over, Rob Bonta created a spreadsheet or model guidelines for higher education, which have samples of these, which will be sent out to you. But understanding that a lot of this stuff is very tricky, right? For example, how many of you know that officers can lie to you? Yeah, obviously, right? Like, what officers are gonna walk up to El Chapo and be like, hey, Chapo, let's talk about some drugs? No, that would be killed, right? Like, he would not make it, right? So again, they can lie. Same concept, right? Lying is an investigative technique or a ruse, pick your word, right? Which is fair, and that's what they should do. But in the context of immigration, it becomes even more difficult. Why? Do immigrants have the right to counsel in immigration court? No, they do not. Only ones that do are Franco clients. Franco was a class action lawsuit for people with mental health disabilities that cannot meaningfully understand the due process or the process that's going on in immigration court. So unless you have a letter from a doctor saying that you have a serious mental disability, you're not getting a lawyer. That's why they had what was called the rocket docket during Trump 1.0. You guys remember that? Kids getting removed within 2 weeks? Yeah, it's like a 3-year-old. Why do you want to be here? I'm sad, where's my parent? Oh, see you later. Yeah, just very, very fast, expedited removal, right? So, but those folks can also avoid some of that situation by knowing little things. You have the right to remain silent. You can ask for a lawyer. I'm not saying that you're gonna get one, but you can ask for one, right? You're not legally entitled to one, but you may ask. Depending on the area where you are, some public defenders actually have immigration defense units. For example, Alameda. Alameda Public Defender will represent people in removal proceedings. We won't, because it's just me and that's way too many people and I will die. But there are some that have that kind of a funding, right? Next slide. When people talk about immigration, it's very important to understand immigration is not what you think. How many of you guys remember Ellis Island? Ellis Island, right? Signatures in a book, beautiful, you can see how your parents came from Europe. Love it. Is that the case now? No. I pulled this from this morning. This is actually from December of 2024. Okay, this is the visa bulletin. How many of you guys have heard what a visa bulletin is? For those of you who have not, if you petition for a family member This is roughly the guide of when your application will be adjudicated or when it will be heard. F1, right, F1 are children of lawful permanent residents or United States citizens. You would have had to apply November 22nd of 2004 to see your child. Your application would have, those are the applications being heard now. Worst DMV line ever, right? Right, but it goes, it's different by country. So for example, mainland China, 2015, not so bad, still not ideal, right? This is what immigrants are dealing with. So when folks say, well, why don't you just come in the right way? My family did it 900 years ago, or whatever it might be. This is what they are dealing with. This is their reality, right? And by arming our friends, our family, our community with this knowledge, right? I'm not saying to let everybody in, I'm not, right? But I'm saying, let's be mindful of even the rules as they are set, how hard they are on you, okay? This is a hypothetical, allegedly, but let me, okay. This is a rule, a law, okay? Imagine this law. I'm gonna just go through the provisions of the law. People shall not receive public social services until verified as a United States citizen or a lawfully admitted alien. People shall not receive any healthcare services from a publicly funded healthcare facility until verified. Elementary or secondary school should not admit or permit the attendance of any child until verified as a citizen or a lawfully admitted alien. Manufacture and distribution of any false ID or residency documents is a felony. What do you guys think about this law? What are your guys' thoughts right off the bat? Why don't you like it? It doesn't say anything about Mexicans, Venezuelans, Peruvians, nothing. What do you guys don't like about this law?
Public elementary school, doesn't that violate a Supreme Court decision on blanking on the one that says that
It does. Well,
they have a right to public education?
fine, let's cross that one out. You like the other one? You're good on it? We'll vote for this? What else don't you guys like?
How do you demonstrate those things?
What do you mean? Well,
I'm in an ER and I don't have my wallet. How do I show I'm a citizen who gets served?
perfect. You can test under penalty of perjury, and if you lie, then we can deport you then. You good with it now?
Hell no.
Why not?
Because hell no.
Why
But
not?
listen, I'm not okay with that. You know, first of all, Governor Newsom says that, you know, even undocumented people can receive healthcare in California. So
Sure, but what if everyone doesn't want to pay for it? Why aren't you okay with it? So I use this example on the next slide because it was an actual real law that did pass in California.
187.
This is Proposition 187. All of those provisions passed in California. It was held unconstitutional by the minister for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned. But if you notice how it was written, the devil is in the details. Never said anything. Hey, I just want my taxes to pay for people that are supposed to be here. End of story, right? It's those details, it's those sub issues, right, which we have to be ready to litigate. Right? But yes, that actually passed. That was the law of the land for like a minute, and then it was, appealed to the ninth, right? But it's one of those things like just to remember, 1994 was not that long ago. It just wasn't, right? And so things to be cognizant of, right? Whenever you get a new law or a new decree or policies at your school or at your place of employment, right? Question it. For example, should everyone's social security number be in the same spot as their patient file? Might want to modify that policy, right? Like all of these little things, or when you apply, right? When you apply to a school, should you need to provide a social security number upfront? Well, we need it for FAFSA. Okay, sure, but how is that going to be divided? Is that going to be kept somewhere separate? Unknown, right? All of those little details on the policies that I'm talking about, the sub issues that are going to have those trickle effects that we don't want to have. The next slide. I love this picture. Who knows what this is? You all are brilliant. Who went to jail here?
no one.
No, come on. You all said Boston Massacre way too quick. Come on. Who went to jail here? Who went to jail?
People are getting killed.
People getting shot.
No one went to jail.
They'll die.
That's right.
No one went to jail. Who represented the British? That's right, John Adams. Not guilty on all of them. This is our first piece of political propaganda, right? Because literally it was a mob attacking some guy. Here, it looks a whole lot more violent, and Paul Revere sold it brilliantly because we needed a revolution. But this is our first piece of political propaganda. The reason I always add this slide is because this has been happening in our country forever, and we are going to see it a lot. The odds are that Trump cannot deport 11 million people because there is no money for it, but he can have hit pieces like this. And where do you think those hit pieces are going to happen? In blue states like ours, right? That's what we expect, that there are going to be workplace raids, right? The other issue that he mentioned in his most recent interview was what? That he was going to start with criminals first. Criminals like 2 petty thefts and you lose your green card. Yeah, those criminals as well, right? Or people that have orders of removal already, right? People that couldn't afford their attorney and they were removed in absentia, for example, at the immigration court, right? Those are the first targets. Okay, next slide. Okay, I love this slide, one of my favorite slides. Let's name everybody up. Who is this? Perfect.
Cesar Chavez.
Okay.
Alan.
Tim Allen, right? Okay.
Robert Downey.
Right, okay.
Bruce Willis.
Okay, good.
Al Pacino.
Nice. And
Frank Sinatra.
perfect. Now, don't tell me because I don't want to know. But if you close your eyes and you think, who do I remember because of their crime? And who do I remember for a different reason? Spicy. I know, right? Again, I mentioned this to consider. Some people have been defined by their crime, and we leave them in that pigeonhole forever, right? Undocumented, you are in that pigeonhole forever, right? But they are much more than that, right? Just like we are able to move beyond. Saul was a decent looking guy, pretty evil afterwards, but yeah, that's Joseph Saul, right? So we're able to look at them in a different light afterwards, right? And we're fine with some of these people making billions of dollars, but other ones, we've kind of pigeonholed them in their little scene, right? So it's going to be incumbent upon us as a community to think outside of the box and say, hey, how can I provide better information to my client, right? How can I provide better information to the community? How can I notice those sub issues before they trickled out and affect more family members? Awesome. So I think that's it. That's all I got.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
So regarding your guys' emails and questions, there was a question about what actions did the previous administration take regarding undocumented and mixed status families, and how are they comparable to Operation Wetback? So that question. Do you all remember the asylum policy that the Trump administration attempted to pass? Did I email it to you?
No.
I will email it to you right now. In the previous Trump administration, asylum policy became substantially more difficult. For example, you could be denied asylum if you were accused of domestic violence, even if you were not convicted. Simply an accusation. You lose your ability to seek asylum. One or two DUIs, you lose your ability to seek asylum. Now, are those owners on their face? Do they look bad? Not necessarily. You're like, well, you know, you're trying to seek a better life, right? And you're an asylum seeker. Maybe you shouldn't be driving drugs. Sure, absolutely. What if that person escaped PTSD from their place of origin? What if they're running away from Syria? What if they're running away from another country going through a war? All of those individualized factors get blanketed over with general policies like the ones that Trump had done last time. Reason to believe is a big one that I deal with. If ICE or CBP has reason to believe that you've engaged in narco trafficking, you are inadmissible. So that's where our cannabis cases come up, right? You can be a student who works at a dispensary, great job, working through school, but because of your job at the dispensary, they run your rap to make sure that you're not, that you don't have any crimes. But that running of your rap still appears on there. So that would be an issue if you were to travel abroad and come back, right? So that's one instance where I would advise probably shouldn't travel, right? Or at least wait until cannabis is decriminalized, right? That would be one issue. The other issue would be health-related inadmissibility. Up until this year, I think it's the I-400, the application to adjust for a spouse, used to ask if you were a habitual drunk, right? Because alcoholism is a mental disease, right? And so if you have a mental disease, you can be deemed inadmissible. That's the basis that they use for COVID, right? These people have a communicable disease, that's why we can't let them in. Yeah, so there is a lot of admissibility issues when it comes to travel, right? But if you're a student and you have, depending on your visa, you may want to ask for what's called advanced parole, which is, for example, we see it a lot in DACA cases where technically DACA students aren't really here, right? But they need to go visit a family member or there's some kind of an emergency abroad. And if they can prove that emergency, they'll be granted a leave for a few days or a week or so, and be allowed to re-enter and reassume their standard DACA practice, right? We do foresee those becoming substantially harder in the next administration to get than they were before.
Let me just stop for a moment and ask if Danielle and Natalie would like to share or respond or comment.
So this is definitely more Alex's lane. So as the civil rights office with the county, as we kind of like whispered earlier, like this, a lot of what comes up with immigration would be under our jurisdiction, where our jurisdiction is mainly is when it comes to like language access and these other policies that could affect, if we have someone in these situations that are needing services from the county, whether it's healthcare or through the courts, when it comes to translation and interpretation services, there's other things that our office has jurisdiction over kind of in that way, but it is very much related to county policies and where county has jurisdiction. Where that is important in this conversation is that when we're talking about like sanctuary cities or sanctuary jurisdictions, even if someone maybe like resides in the city of Monterey, but something happens outside of that, that's where the county would have jurisdiction. I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, I think, in terms of policy-wise, the policies that our office upholds, Title VI, Title VII, Monterey County non-discrimination policy, things like that fall within those parameters. I think, when we look at the issues that are I think being able to provide adequate information, adequate resourcing to not just students, but the community as a whole is gonna be key to also informing. We went through something similar during 2020 with the census, where there was a huge, people were really concerned about sharing information about where they live, about their status, about their families. So being able to talk to residents and we will need as a county the support of nonprofits, organizations that are working with community to make sure that we get a certain message out in terms of letting people know, one, what their rights are, and understanding the issues that come with immigration, because that certainly is going to be an issue that will impact. But understanding that, as Alejandro was mentioning, they still have rights. They don't have to respond to everything or anything they're asked just because somebody's asking them. But understanding if they share information, what's going to happen with that information, how it's going to be used, what the purpose of that will be, because that is something that is going to be a concern. With regards to students, the standards are probably going to get tighter when it comes to approving the F, especially the student visas and reapproval. I was just listening this morning to Dean of USC Law School talking about recommendations they were making to students, at least if they're thinking of traveling over the holidays, return before the inauguration, January 20th. So at least they can see, once they're already back in the country, they can see what the prospect is going to be with the new administration. But I think on our end and from our standpoint, the most important piece is being able to communicate and talk to residents and talk to the community that we serve, not just as a civil rights office, but as a county as a whole, and working with community partners is helping them understand where they can go to get help, where they can go to seek assistance if they need legal representation, point them in the direction where they could get that. And that I think is in the basis what we think, and we can have the discussion of whether these policies are right or wrong. That's important, but understanding what in real tangible way we can help those communities.
So again, I understand the outreach, especially in the agricultural community statewide, reaching out to the immigrants that are doing the work. What effort is being made to better educate those who employ them? We're going to take a substantial hit as well if this actually happens, so that they can be more proactive with their labor force.
That's a double-edged sword. And the reason is this: we have benefited from low-cost labor for decades. We just have, right? If you recall, the Biden administration, I think in year 2, provided a deferred action for labor violations, right? So if someone was not getting paid their wages or they were threatened at work, it's like, hey, if you report these OSHA violations, we're going to deport you. They could request deferred status directly from the government, right? I think the incentive is going to have to come from the workers themselves to demand those rights. But then again, double-edged sword. Do you really want your employer running your social and running you through E-Verify? Right? It gets really tricky, right? I mean, what would the argument be, right? Undocumented labor would end tomorrow if every employer was required to run E-Verify. But then again, a lot of our industry would fail, right? And so it's understanding those balances. So it isn't an easy answer of getting an employer on board, right? I think it's going to be more of a getting the employer to participate with the actual employees, right? Like,
Yes.
hey, ICE gave us some notifications, company-wide email to like the supervisors or whoever, hey, we're getting some notices, these things might come, right? Just for providing that information, because bottom line is it's going to be hard for everybody, but no employer is going to be willingly saying, hey, I'm going to run E-Verify on everybody and then report all my violations in case undocumented help has been hired, right? Kind of it's a tough.
We've got a couple of, questions coming through the chat, but I know Nadine, you've got to run, so let you ask your question first, and then we'll deal with this.
Thank you. So I work in the admissions office here, and I'm very concerned about the possibility of an incoming student getting deported. And I don't think they have any criminal background, but my question is, one, can that happen? Can someone come here? Because she'll be in our systems. I don't know what that might trigger with the government or whatever, but can someone come here and take her away? Part one of my question. And then the second question is, what resources would you recommend to an undocumented student here? Like, what can I immediately share with my students? Your contact, website, what should I make sure she knows? They know.
Well, one, the Monterey County Bar Association attorney referral service. If they have a list of attorneys practicing immigration law in the area. If they need to contact anybody, they would be able to provide some level of information. I would say, in terms of maybe CRLA, California Rural Legal Assistance, Watsonville Law Center, nonprofit organizations that provide legal services for free in the community would be a good way, I think. And I think it goes also to admissibility and the way they came into the country. Because you can have a visa and overstay your visa, and then you're you're unlawfully in the United States. Not particularly unlawfully, but because you overstay your visa, once that visa expires, you're still. It depends on the type of inadmissibility that you have, which I think that was very important that you touched on that.
Right.
You know, you wanna,
The only thing I would add is I would check with your, whoever the powers that be are here and ask whether or not they're open to sponsoring F1 students, right? And if you guys have a streamlined process for that.
We have our.
Perfect. So then if that, with that undocumented person, I would ask, can they qualify for F1 status, right?
So what if the student doesn't qualify for DACA, they don't qualify for an F1 status?
So in that case, I don't think that they would be picked up, because again, most interactions with immigration are triggered by some crime or some criminality, right? So I don't think that that would necessarily come up. I would probably refer them also to the Undocu Success Center at CSUMB or most of the CSUNs. The Undocu Success Center at CSUN and most CSUN campuses are teaching undocumented students to become independent contractors and essentially LLC themselves, which is bananas to me. Because I couldn't do that when I was 18, and we're expecting these kids to do it, and they are, right? They're LLCing themselves, they're becoming independent business owners so they can work legally because the employer would now pay the LLC rather than paying the undocumented student, right? So they can attempt that type of legal maneuver, again, lawyers, God, go for it. But in this case, it's really helpful, right? So that student, for example, I've recommended a few students from CSUMB who speak Trique or Zapotec or other indigenous languages to LLC themselves immediately and try to get work even with the court, right? Because in that way, they can still gain income lawfully, still pay their taxes, even though they're in undocumented status.
Yeah, for all that information, Immigrants Rising does have a lot of webinars posted, and that is something that DocuSuccess is working towards next semester to have a workshop. Also, Cabrillo College is hosting an Docu conference this Saturday. So this is open to all the communities, tri-counties, and there's gonna be community resources coming around, and just very useful information for the undocumented communities. But for that student in particular, they're in this institution, right? They would hopefully look, okay, yeah, because it's different from institution to institution, it varies.
I have a question about that. We're part of Middlebury in Vermont. Are all these computer records on a computer in California or on a computer in Vermont or both?
Good question.
So that's where the handout that I emailed you will help, that has model policies from RAG suggesting that like certain things should be kept separately or should be able to be easily divided, right? And again, it's gonna be, we all want to comply with law enforcement. That's our instinct, right? Like all of us have that instinct in us, like, well, if I didn't do anything, I have nothing to hide, right? So that's that, right? All of us have that instinct, right? It's gonna be incumbent on us, especially institutions like this. If you get a warrant or you get something, you immediately take it to your counsel and say, hey, is this lawful? Can I even comply with this, right? Some people will do it just out of practice, like, yeah, I'll send it over, no problem, right? And the ICE detainer that I showed you was one that was received by the Monterey County Sheriff's Office like 3 years ago. And I remember at the time, I went in and had to train the deputies and be like, you know how many times you can get sued for violating someone's constitutional rights? Like, you guys gotta read, right? But it's that kind of a thing, right? Just taking that pause and saying, hey, what are the sub issues, right? It really is, do they have the lawful authority to even ask for this stuff? Another trick that we see a lot in my practice is juvenile records. So any juvenile crime is not a conviction for immigration purposes. It's an adjudication, okay? There is a legal difference. But what happens there is when juveniles then become adults and gain some kind of a status or attempt to gain some status, immigration will say, bring me your file, right? And so at our office, we have a policy of, nope, it has been sealed. I will reply with you with a letter saying what the adjudication was, but that's it, right? And these are the reasons why we're doing that, right? If you still want the file, we will give it to you, but we want to give you this warning first, right? Because what we were finding is that people would get their file, take it to immigration services would read everything and be like, nope, we're denying. right? When they lawfully should not have, like that person put themselves in the crosshairs, right?
Do all of you guys have cards for contact information?
While you're doing that, one of the questions from the chat, and it says, Natalie, does the county engage or will it engage on educating the population about these challenges, or are you relying on NGOs to do this? And will there be a collective forum where the county and various NGOs will come together on this?
So the county, as of last Tuesday at our Board of Supervisors meeting, created an ad hoc committee. So, those things are in the works, and the ad hoc committee, that was set up by the Board of Supervisors just like a week ago. I would say like, keep your eyes and ears out, but there will likely be information. And then I know that like school districts are putting together events with different NGOs, but it's something that as the Civil Rights Office, just this morning, we were talking about what is our jurisdiction? Where is it? Where are our spaces that we can provide this information? What are things that we can do within our jurisdiction? But part of that is also gonna be looking at the Board of Supervisors and what they charge us with. They are our bosses. So if you are a resident of Monterey County, you have a supervisor in this county, figure out what district you live in, and contact that supervisor and that supervisor's office. If this is something that you want to see the county prioritize, this is your civic engagement to do that. That will then help us do this work, but we have to get that approval and that direction from the Board of Supervisors. And so if you're here in the Monterey, if you're in Monterey or Seaside, it's likely Wendy Askew or who will be Kate Daniels coming up. And then if you're in Salinas, it's Luis Alejo. If you're North County, it's gonna be Glenn Church. And then if you're South County, it's Chris Lopez. Is that all five? Yeah, so figure out what district you live in, figure out who your supervisor is, contact their office. If this is something that you wanna see prioritized, again, as a resident of the county, you're electing the Board of Supervisors. They are your your elected representative. And so by going that route, that helps support the work that we do. And it helps support that work Alex does too. It gives the county, if the residents speak up about what they want, right? This is how our representative government works. If you speak out about what you want to see, that will help us be able to make the case for the work that we want to do to support these efforts. So make those phone calls, write those emails. Yeah.
This morning I was in that meeting. They had the meeting this morning. One thing that I noticed and asked was the following. Since 2018, the county sheriff is required to have a Truth Act form. A Truth Act form essentially tells the public and the Board of Supervisors, this is how many interactions we've had with ICE, and this is how many times we've complied with those interactions. Yes. I was unable to find the report for the last 2 years. Concern, right? So those are the types of issues that we can bring up, right? If I know something is supposed to happen and it's not happening, or I can't find it, we should just ask, right? Like, hey, law says you kind of got to do this. Like, is it happening? Is it somewhere where it isn't accessible? And more the reason for that is if our law enforcement wants to be community-based and have people trust them, right? I think you kind of have to trust the people back, right? And say, hey, we're complying with the law, but we're only like reporting on people that commit XYZ types of issues, right? If you call me because they vandalized your car, I'm not going to call ICE on you, right? I think that's the part that law enforcement would have to kind of let us know, right, that they're not doing that kind of stuff, or that they are, right, whatever may be the case, right? I don't think that they are, but right, whatever may be the case. So those, I think, are the community things that we gotta like really kind of harp on and notice, right? Because if we don't, like, who's keeping anybody accountable?
Just want to say, Juan Rodriguez, who is our director of civil rights, is here with us, and I think you wanted to mention something, Juan? Just to, actually what Natalie and Alex, because I saw Alex in that meeting in the morning, and I'm sure he left to make it on time. I'm sorry I couldn't make it on time. I was at that immigration meeting, and yes, absolutely. Somebody mentioned whether only CBOs were gonna do it. Not really, it's, I know the two supervisors that are on that ad hoc committee, Supervisor Lopez and Alejo, are very interested in it. There were some immigration attorneys there, there was a representative of the Mexican consulate there, a ton of CBOs from Santa Cruz and from Monterey County, even I think a chief of staff from a supervisor from Santa Cruz County, which I think is probably the one that is in Watsonville. Because we share Pájaro and Watsonville with Santa Cruz County. So there's definitely, our Office of Education was there, Deneen Gus, the superintendent, I guess it's her title. So yes, absolutely. And then yesterday, just because my kids go to MPUSD, I know MPUSD put up an immigration forum yesterday in English and in Spanish, essentially a know your rights type of forum. So yes, there's a lot of things going on, not only CBOs, but also the county and other government agencies. I saw representatives from the city of Salinas, for example. I think there was somebody from Monterey. And this is, I mean, it was about what Alex, maybe 60 people. So we didn't go and introduce ourselves because that would have been the whole meeting, but I was looking at the attendees. So you have a good representation of the county. A lot of trade organizations like hospitality industry, ag industry, because I think somebody mentioned about educating the employers. They're on board with that. I don't know about, because I wasn't here for about the running, but they were definitely trying to get that information out to the employees. I get it. I'm pragmatic. We've been talking a lot about, oh my God, the poor industries are gonna suffer. I wish the conversation was more like, what about the families and the people that are suffering?
Yes.
But that's okay, I'll take it. I'll take it if it gets us to the same result. And they're very motivated, be it by dollars or by humanity, I don't care. But something is happening. So I'm really excited about that ad hoc committee, actually. I didn't pick up when the next meeting is gonna be, but it sounded like it's not just a meeting about having meetings to have another meeting, but there's action items to it. So I'm looking forward to it. Like Natalie said, the board just unanimously approved it on Tuesday. And today was the first meeting, and they already distributed Know Your Rights information, which I'm sure other people are gonna send out. But yeah, that's what I wanted to add. Thank you. Sorry, I was late.
No, that's quite all right. We also have another comment from Ebony Glover. The Village Project is a nonprofit source for underserved communities to receive culturally appropriate mental health and counseling for families. We currently have a bilingual therapist. We also have a Nyumbani program that assists with court counseling and reintegrates those with a record in the community. And she provides the Village Project's website, so we'll get that on the list of resources as well. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you for inviting me, Dr. McCurry. I'm Jacqueline Simon. I was one of the individuals that was working with your students in administration 4 weeks before the election and a couple of weeks afterwards, essentially almost talking us off the ledge after those results, right? And what I mentioned was something similar to what was said a little while ago is you must be vigilant. You must come, I'm an elected official as well in this county. I want you as an individual within my district to come and make sure that I'm doing my job, protecting you, because that's what my oath said, regardless of race, creed, color, gender, what have you. So please do that. We're at a place that we cannot not do that because so much is at stake. In addition to our democracy, like you mentioned, the families. So in my district, the oath I took was definitely in reference to anyone that has any problem. You don't have to even be in my district. Let's find out what resources are there. Let's find out what I can do to help protect you. Let's make sure that, law enforcement realizes that their role in this and their role not in this. And also, just be supportive of those students and individuals that really are the potential victims of all this. Not to mention the stress. Stress kills. I'm a part of about 3 groups, and one group was a group of 500 people. And a third of them had tears in their eyes. A third of them were afraid and didn't know what to do, don't know how to do. And my words are just keep being a part of these groups, keep believing in democracy and ourselves. That election was not a massive mandate by any means. And there's enough of us to continue to fight that fight and remind people that it wasn't. I go over all universities, I'm a professor as well. And in those that I mentor, just some of the comments being made by those that supported the other candidate. When are you leaving my country now? We won. They didn't win. They won an election. And hear me when I say we have 2 years to motivate people to make some better sense and better results of what has happened. And we need to do that because it is about the vote. But we need to be concerned, and I don't know why 7 million people chose not to vote for democracy, but it happened. So we need to, on the 3rd level, we need to make sure we start doing something in reference to that too. Electeds, keep us accountable to what we took the oath of office for. So thank you for letting me share.
I did just want to add one more thing. You all are professionals and specialists in your own right? Like lawyers, we mumble with words and throw it all up there, right? But you all, let me give you a brief story. I had a client, I would always get on his case for coming late to court. Why are you always late? Why are you always late? Court today 15. And he would always tell me the same thing. Dude, I told you spinach. Dude, I told you spinach. And finally I was like, look, man, I don't know what spinach means. He's like, well, we farm it at night. Like I work at night. And I was like, why don't you just tell me you work at night, man? Come on, right? But we weren't talking that same language because in his mind, it's like, everyone knows this. Like I'm a specialist in my own thing. Spinach means I work at night, right? So I task you in each of your own industries, right? In your professions, right? Look at those policies, look at those procedures. That employee handbook that you haven't dusted off for 20 years, right? Like little things in there that you might be able to say, hey, this could be an issue for us, right? Maybe we should talk about it. Maybe we should update the policy on this. Maybe we should update the policy on that. Because the more you are aware in your own areas of expertise, right? The more that's going to get spread out to other areas of expertise. And then more people are, because a lot of it is just raising that consciousness level. So I definitely appreciate that all of you guys came out today.
Okay, because I think, when times like these come, it's, echoing what you're saying. I think we need to put our working hats on and now's the time to really just keep going and don't stop. From our standpoint, and we're really working towards the language access policy in terms of giving access to communities in our county that have limited access to services, resources, really making sure that through that service and through that work, we let them know that they are a part of this community, that they are a wanted part of this community, that they are key members, and that because of their work and the profession, our economy in our county and in the state is one of the strongest. So I think, just keeping that in mind, because I see a lot of people saying, oh, some defeatist, mindset. I think we need to be above that and we need to think about how we're gonna make sure that the community and the people that live in our county feel like they're wanted members of our community and that they are a key part of everything, that we do and why we do this work. So just, I know, we fall down, get up, dust ourselves, and let's keep going because that's what we're gonna need to do.
What I wanted to add into echoing a little bit of what Alex said, but knowing that the folks that are on Zoom and the folks that are in the room, we all have different spheres of influence is the way that I often frame it. So us at the Civil Rights Office, we have these particular policies in this particular jurisdiction But really take some time to think about what is your sphere of influence and what that is like for you as an individual. So that's not just where you work, but where you live, who are you spending time with, where are these places, what are the policies that you can look at? Whether it's a workplace policy or a school policy, if you have kids in a school district or at a particular school, even it's looking at these things that, how do we make the changes that we need to make so that it is further protecting our community? And again, also making sure that the folks that are going to be most impacted by some of these things have the information that they need in the language that is going to make sense to them. And I don't just mean written and spoken language, but it's folks like Alex who can say like, yeah, lawyers, the way that lawyers talk do not make it easy for us to know what this means. If a policy doesn't make sense to you in the language that you work in all the time, then trying to translate that into another language, those are the types of things like, hey, if this policy doesn't make sense to me, who do I need to talk to work through that, right? And there's formal and informal policies. It's looking at practices and culture within our spaces as well. So just my charge would be to all of you to really think about what is your sphere of influence. If this is something that you care about and you want to learn, how can I protect the families and our students in these communities? It's really thinking about it through that lens of what is my personal responsibility based on my sphere of influence. If you're sitting in this room, you have a sphere of influence. Think about what that looks like, and really take hold and take charge and take up space in those, because that's what's going to help really make these changes, these incremental changes that are going to make it harder for some of these things coming down to really take root.
One thing on your comment about language, from a person who's dealt in that, at least in the government space for a long time, provide salient examples. Not the legalese, but salient examples of what that means to the person you're trying to convey it to when they say admissible, or that's a big word that could mean lots of different things. Salient examples to get in front of us.
I guess one question that I have, again, I sent it to you all, but thinking about, because once they start the unannounced raids, I'm wondering, what can we do to defend against those targeted or possible collateral arrests that they're potentially going to try to do, hitting schools, hitting churches, hitting hospitals, those places where traditionally they haven't, they sort of wouldn't hit them. But again, we know they did it last time, they're gonna try to do the same thing. So if ICE shows up on our campus and I realize,
You mentioned it.
yeah, we're probably not gonna be the top target in that regard in terms of schools in the area. But what can we do? If they show up and they start trying to dragoon students or staff or faculty.
Our county has been blessed by being lulled to sleep in some regards. So let me explain what I mean. SB 54, our county since 2018, 2019, has not participated with ICE as much as it used to. Pre-2017, there was literally like an ICE guide desk at the Monterey County Jail. So they really were like ICE, right? Since 2017, they have no longer done that. However, that lulling has also depleted the rapid response networks that existed prior to. For example, I know Sonoma County, Santa Clara County, other counties have rapid response networks where ICE raids happen more frequently. So what the goal now would be between now and January 20th, ideally through this ad hoc immigration committee that we were discussing with the Board of Supervisors, is to create those emergency response networks. Whereas, for example, if you are informed, hey, there's a raid at the field of the corner of Blanco and Davis, you have a number where you can call and that information could get disseminated to practitioners that'll either go and do removal defense or at least be able to represent people or find out where they're going, right? Even just to know, okay, these people are being moved to this facility or that facility, right? Because the big fear is when those raids happen and people are taken and no one knows where they went. And they don't, obviously they don't disappear in a vacuum, they went somewhere, right? But having those rapid response networks set. So really between now and inauguration date, my hope, at least for the committee that we've been discussing with the Board of Supervisors and communities at large, is getting those contacts, right? And that network of people that can try to show up when there's that emergency.
This has been fantastic, and I wish more people had known about it. We kind of stumbled on it. Is there a way to get a clearinghouse about like the thing at Cabrillo, so we know what everyone's doing, so we build more of a network, so we're stronger together and we can do the rapid response thing and help each other build?
Sure, I mean, I think we could probably start with a resource page.
Yeah, we can add it to our website, kind of like, instead of the registration link, we can add with some of the helpful links that have been shared or in the email, but definitely have to collect these important resources.
I would suggest, and we can make sure that we send this to Nick, but I think tracking that ad hoc committee, a lot of the agencies that we're talking about that are gonna, a lot of this like countywide strategy, and there's a word that I'm reaching for that I can't get, but I think kind of tracking that ad hoc committee, and it's
It's public.
It's an ad hoc committee, so so folks can log into those meetings and attend and get the updates. And you can go to the county website and track the meetings.
I suggest if you contact either District 1 office or District 3 and get on the mailing list, and they'll include you in this ad hoc committee meeting, so you know, and then that's a network that they're building.
Okay.
You know.
Network was the word I was looking for. Okay, yeah, but
teamwork.
yeah, we're a good office. No, but
We
I,
complement each other.
yeah, but I think, and we can share that with Nick, but I think that's gonna be an important piece going forward, is building this strong network of community-based organizations, educational institutions, government institutions, and make sure that we're coordinating these efforts. And just District 1 and District 3, it's Alejo's office and Lopez's office, if that helps, knowing kind of which supervisors to check their websites and kind of see what's going on with the ad hoc committee.
Comment from online. It's charitable giving season. If whoever's pulling the list together would add the names of some NGOs that are active in our region on these issues, then you've got the potential for donor support before 12/31. Retired philanthropoid here.
Good job.
That's also a good way to get on their mailing list, to figure out
No
what's going on with this network.
How can one as a student, one educate other students, right? And also, in a way, try to figure out where the administration stands, right? And also hold them accountable, right? Because for example, at certain CSU, they have certain policies where it's time, place, and manner, right? Stay apolitical. Well, how can, you have these conversations and not be, right, swinging to one side, or if that makes any sense?
That's a hard question, because all CSUs, Cal States, they rely on federal money, right? So it's not like you're gonna be at CSU and be like, forget this, we're not doing this, no way, like, they'll be fund your school, like, you have to do what the law says, right? I think it's more about you as a student informing yourself about what the law is and just asking, right? Are our current policies and procedures in compliance with the law? Here is the law that I'm asking about, here is the policy, just being very clear, right? Like, as I mentioned earlier, right? Like, I know that the Truth Act forum has to happen every year, right? That's a policy, I know that, right? But if I can't find it in the supervisor's minutes, it's my duty to ask, what happened, right? Same with you, right? If you think that there is a policy that you find that is not congruent with the law that you're finding, ask. Because there could be an exception, right? Or there could be something that says, hey, as a CSU student, when you signed that application, you actually gave up blank right. And maybe you didn't even know about it, right? Like, for example, if you live on campus housing, right? There's probably certain rules that apply there that may not apply if you live off campus housing, right? So it's just asking the question. I would caution you though, as a former young person myself, we get very lippy sometimes. I know I did. I was very in your face and I never achieved what I could have achieved had I been more mindful of how I approach things, right? I don't think people in power or people in positions above you are trying to harm you or trying to like keep you down or do anything toward you, but they also have a responsibility for the whole school, right? So that's why I would always caution, like, if you're gonna frame that type of an issue, come prepared, right? Like, here's the law I read, here's the policy, help me understand, right? Rather than being like, well, you ain't doing this and ha, can't do that either, right? Like, you wanna be mindful, right? Because it's not just, they're looking out for all populations, right?
Two things that I would add to that also. So one, Daniel whispered it in my ear and I think it's a good idea, but I think also like what can you do on a campus? I think also tapping into what other student groups are already forming, whether they're some sort of affinity group or if there's clubs on campus, and get that energy mobilizing and organizing in that space too. It's a way to disseminate information. It's a way to build trust. There might be students on campuses that feel like they're doing this alone, but building that community enough that they're building that support, peer-to-peer support can make a big difference. And then the other thing that I was gonna say, and it's not directly to your question, but kind of building off of what Alex was saying too. If you do, we run into this a lot as the county civil rights office. We get people who call our office thinking that we have power and jurisdiction over things that we just do not have. And so in the same way of like kind of doing some of that work, the legwork before you show up somewhere, recognize that often that first person that you're talking to likely does not know, or it's not totally in their lane or in their field. And so going in with a little bit of patience and grace. So you run into it all the time. We get phone calls. We hear you. We're frustrated too. We wish that we could give you a better answer, but sometimes the response that we have to give folks is like, this is not our sphere of influence. Let me give you the resources. But the more that you can go in like a pragmatic way, people will usually go out of their way to try to help you too. And so just being mindful of that, but my main point of what I wanted to share with you is I think most campuses have some sort of like clubs or affinity groups of some sort, but maybe if there's not one specifically around immigration, this might be the opportunity, get that started now, and get that mobilized and going now, before certain things come down. I think I worked in Nashville for a while and saw the impact of just like keywords in commissions and committees made it so that some of this stuff, some of this work was just deemed unconstitutional and just axed at the knees. So just being aware of like whatever you can get going now, get it established, and be mindful of some of the keywords that you're using and what you're establishing, to make sure that it can have the legs after January 20th.
So would you say that a good idea would be to collaborate with the CSUB on DocuSuccess? And we actually do have an on-docu managed student club on campus, which is the Otter Dreamers. Would you say that maybe like running, maybe not a campaign, but like an info, like throughout the semester where you just know your rights, you know, where we're just, not even just for undocumented students, but for the general public at large. Would you say that would be a good idea?
More information can't hurt.
Yeah. And
No, yeah, so also, you know, and I know that some organizations were doing this and during, you know, the first Trump tenure, the creation of informational cards, or red cards, you know, that have resources, specific information. I think you mentioned it about, you know, where you can go immediately. And, you know, now that the ad hoc committee is getting together and joining, having those key resources and information in those, it's something that we can do individually as county departments, but also CBOs and you know, educational institutions could have those informational cards where, you know, if you want to pick one up and you have that information. Okay. So that's something you can distribute fast, those little piece of paper, you know, post them on cafes, coffee shops, wherever, and people can email them there as well.
You could get those from ILRC, ilrc.org. They're an organization out of San Francisco. They're the ones that originally created the red cards. They're in Spanish on one side, English on the other. Just kind of gives you your general rights when interacting with immigration. I'm sure as a school, you guys can request them and they'd be more than happy to send some. I know that we have some at the office as well.
Okay, thank you.
Time for maybe one more question.
But this isn't a question, it's more of a statement. Having worked in the educational arena for decades, want to thank Dr. McCurry pulling this together and even being mindful enough to know that students were stressing out 4 weeks before the election. So Middlebury Institute, know that you're doing the right thing. I work with many campuses. No one was doing it like you all were. So applaud you for that and having you work in that arena. Lastly, a good friend and elected Supervisor Wendy Root Askew was one of the first people on the ground organizing and getting people together. So yes, Lopez, Alejo, they're doing things now, great, wonderful, good. But Wendy and her office has always been proactive for everyone throughout the entire county. So I've worked with many of them. You can ask them, Jacqueline Simon, for those of you on Zoom. And just all of us work together. This isn't an us and them thing. This is all of us together against them. Because believe me, they are circling the wagons and they have many, they have much more money. They have other resources. After January 21st, this is going to be on. So we need to certainly circle the wagons and work together with everyone and anyone that has an interest of working in these environments. And just one last question, have you had a chance to speak with the sitting new sheriff and what their approach is and what's going to be based on what has happened before? And if you haven't, I suggest you do.
We're gonna.
Okay, so like I said, I'm elected and I have a law enforcement background. We need to make sure that is something we're doing as well. So anyway, congratulations to all of you for what you're doing today. This is democracy right here, grassroots level.
Well, thank you all for coming and taking the time to join this very rich conversation. We are recording it, and so hopefully within the next few days, we'll have that up on our website. So if there's anything you want to go back and look at or share it with others, you'll be able to do so. And again, thank you as well to all of you on Zoom. This has been a wonderful conversation, so thank you.
Thank you.